Police. What dumb call turned serious very quickly? Deputy here. It was a Saturday night and I had a call for an erratic vehicle, unable to stay in lane, speeding, etc. Everyone assumed it was a routine DWI because it was Saturday night and started looking. Well, she passed me on a main road, so I turned around and conducted a traffic stop. She stopped her car in a terrible place, so I approached on the passenger side. She was very angry and disrespectful and wouldn't turn to look at me, just looked forward. I could smell alcohol, wasn't sure if it was coming from her or the vehicle. I asked for her license and registration to run her information. I decided I was going to talk to her more on the driver's side and see if I could find signs of impairment. When I walked over to her side, I saw the entire left side of her face was bruised and blood was coming out of her mouth. Also, a bruise on her neck in the shape of a hand and fingers. I had her step out to ask about it. She informed me her boyfriend got drunk and thought she was cheating on him and decided to hold her down by the neck and punch her approximately 10 times. She had major swelling and the blood was a cut from her cheek against her teeth. It took 25 minutes to convince her to give me his information. She told me he lives in a neighboring state and the incident occurred there. I called the neighboring state police and informed them. Found the guy had 3 felony warrants and they've been looking for him. Well, certainly hope that this guy, first of all, hope that she was okay ultimately, but secondly, this guy needs to be caught, apprehended, and locked up. There's no place for people like this roaming around in the world. Next story. Sheriff Deputy here. During patrol, I started noticing at one house that their packages being delivered at their front door weren't being taken inside. A lot of these packages were groceries. I also noticed their mail wasn't being brought in. Usually, the Postal Service mentions something when they see this, but I brought it upon myself to do a welfare check. I arrived at the door and knocked. No answer. I knocked a few more times. No answer. I started thinking maybe the person that lives there may be gone for a while. I decided to take one peek through the front window, and I saw an elderly woman laying on the ground. I announced to dispatch what I saw, and I'm entering the house immediately. Luckily, I didn't have to kick the front door down, and instead discovered the back door was unlocked. I entered the house and the lady was alive, but due to her older age, she wasn't able to stand back up on her own strength after falling and has been laying on the ground for 2 days. I got paramedics to arrive and take her to a nearby hospital. I found her phone book with personal numbers in her kitchen and called her adult children and notified them of what happened. They were very relieved and drove to the hospital to help care for her. Next story. It was dumb and routine before we got there. It was a local, well-known drunken criminal, jack of all trades, who was playing with fireworks. Not an uncommon thing. However, he was in his living room, and they were very powerful and illegal. He was entertaining himself by lighting the wick and putting it out. He wasn't quick enough one time. The mortar went through his roof, blasted the storm door off the hinges into the front yard. His torso lacerated, intestines needed to be pushed back in and sewn up. About a year later, almost to the day, he got in a fight with his girlfriend on the interstate highway. At some point they pulled over. He got out and doors were locked, so he climbed on the hood. She started driving and he fell off. Wasn't even in very bad shape. He was shirtless, of course, and I saw the surgery scars from the year prior. Next story. I got the opposite response here. Got a call that a woman was giving birth, so me and a rookie head over to the address. Rookie was super excited to get to help with this since he hadn't gotten the opportunity yet. So we pull up and his face drops. It's a 50-year-old methed up woman rolling and screaming in her grass, saying that she's giving birth to a dog. Anyways, I tell my partner to F on out of here and go help the woman deliver that dog. That call went from serious to dumb very quickly. Next story. Not a cop, but the son of one. Lots of stories I could tell, but one has always stood out in particular. Police were called one night due to noise complaint at someone's house. When police arrive, it's discovered that there's meth, and the person in the house, we'll call him Jerry, is on it like no tomorrow. More cops eventually show up, and none of them can keep Jerry down. They try using a taser, but it's ineffective on its own. As Taser is getting a new battery, 8 cops tackle Jerry all at once and are still struggling to keep him down. Dude with Taser then shoves Taser against Jerry's balls and says, quote, "Put your hands behind your back or your balls are getting electrocuted." Jerry then magically complies with police officers. Next story. Police here got a call of some lady that refused to get out of the bathroom. It's around 2 a.m. and the cleaning crew of a restaurant let her inside, but she didn't want to leave. It's raining and cold outside. I think it was January. We get there and another set of officers from a nearby precinct respond because it's boring when it's cold and raining. The lady comes out dressed in simple pajamas, no shoes or socks, holding an infant wrapped in a baby blanket. No jacket, no coat, no warm anything. Just button-down pajamas and her tiny infant. All of us are like, hold up, they aren't dressed for this weather at all. This mom looks pretty normal, as in she's not a transient. We learn later she's a brain surgeon and lives in a very swank condo. Turns out she walked 6 to 8 blocks down the street in the rain dressed like this. Then the mother displays behavior attributed to mental health disorders. Starts screaming they are trying to kill her, gets incredibly manic, hunches down and her eyes go wild, but she's holding that baby tight. We know she needs to go to a psych hospital, but we have to get the baby away first. We plead we want to help her. Just let us hold the baby. She won't, of course, because in her mind, we're all trying to kill her. At one point, she whispers, kind of spooky, "Give me a gun and I'll do it myself." We swarm her, 2 for the baby and 2 on her, and she's screaming bloody murder. It was unnerving, to say the least. My partner and I took the call. Report. We get a hold of Dad and take the baby back to him. He didn't realize she had left. He's a doctor too. He mentioned she didn't want to take her psych meds anymore and hadn't taken them in about a week. Lesson learned. If you need psych meds, please take your meds. Don't ever think you're all better without them. Edit. We took the mother to a psych hospital for a 72-hour eval. Hope she got back on her feet, but we don't know. Next story. Not a cop. This happened outside my college residence, and I imagine they had a laugh at this before they showed up because my roommates and I sure did. This kid was all messed up on some kind of drug and was screaming and beating the crap out of a backhoe loader that had been left there overnight due to some construction working on campus. Obviously, construction equipment is generally made out of pretty thick steel, so it's not like he was doing much damage. By this point, campus security had been by, and I'm assuming we're like, F this, we need the real police, because they just stopped for 10 minutes and then kept driving. I'm assuming this is the point where the police were called. Turns out, some dumbass left the keys in the machine. You know, because that's what you do on a college campus full of drunk teenagers. So this kid somehow figures out how to start it and proceeds to drive straight forward into the backup generator for the residence building across from mine, knocking it off its concrete pad and crushing it up against the wall. Then tried to back up, but the cops have arrived at this point and blocked his escape. He then tries to drive over the lawn to get away, but since he can't figure out how to raise the bucket up, he can't get it over the curb and ends up bending the crap out of the bucket by hitting the concrete repeatedly. Obviously was arrested on the spot. Yeah, this certainly might be the stupidest thing we've read so far. My God, like what would even compel you to do something like this and then try to drive away on the same vehicle that you've done all this damage in? Come on now. Next story. Not a cop, paramedic here. The police and I were called to a public intoxication. No idea why medics were called, but anyway. The guy was hammered and had been stranded by his drinking buddies because he didn't want to get into the car. Good for him. He was on the phone when I got there, and he handed it to me and said, "I can't talk to her." So I took the phone from him and hung it up and handed it back. Turns out he wanted me to talk to her for him. Whoops. He went ballistic and threw a punch at me. And as he was punching, the cop put a boot in his back. Great reaction time. Still don't know how he did it. The guy ended up smashing his face on the road and suffered a concussion, plus some other stuff. This was years ago, and I still remember because I felt so guilty at the time. Next story. City cop here. I was driving to a call for service and saw a vehicle that was stopped in opposite lanes of traffic. There were about 7 vehicles stopped behind it, but a green light was in front of the stopped car. I made a U-turn at the next intersection and went back to the stopped car. I approached the passenger side on foot, and I saw an elderly driver alone in the driver's seat. She wasn't responding at all to me from outside the vehicle. She was just looking straight ahead with 2 hands on the wheel with the car in gear. I walked over to the driver's side and saw she had a gash in the left side of her head, about 4 inches long and so deep I could see her skull. Blood was running down her face and neck, pooling in her lap. I smashed the back window to get access to the shifter and put the car in park, then called for medics. As they were en route, she started having a seizure. I had to keep her wound closed, neck in a neutral position, and make sure her tongue wasn't getting bit off. The medics showed up, so I left the scene and went to her house, checked the plate registration for the address, as it was right around the corner. I show up there and interrupt a burglary in progress. Two meth-head a-holes apparently thought they could get away with a home invasion by knocking out the old bird and taking their time. They didn't figure her to be tough enough to get up and flee her house when they were upstairs. After all this, I learned she had terminal cancer and was near death anyways, but we at least got a couple lower criminals off the street. Next story. Not me, but my dad, who is a cop and is still a firefighter, had one that I still laugh at. He was working a shift on the police department back in the early to mid-80s and got a call late one night for smoke showing from a residence. His assistant chief shows up first. I should preface by saying he was a fat and lazy F and didn't properly check and radio dispatch that there wasn't smoke showing and to disregard the fire department. My dad shows up and his AC tells him that it was a false alarm, and my said he was going to check anyway. He said he smelled smoke as he got out of his cruiser and said he was going to check for himself. He opens the backyard fence and down the small hill to the back. As he walked to the back of the house, he saw smoke pouring out of the soffits and saw flames in the back windows. He radios dispatch to have the fire department remain en route, and that smoke and flames visible, and then asks for mutual aid from a neighboring department. Fire department shows up and was able to knock down the fire before it got too out of hand, besides some serious smoke damage. But the house was eventually refinished and still stands to this day. Next story. Not a cop, but this is a story from my criminal justice professor from college, who was a cop in North Carolina. There was this house she and her partner had to visit frequently for domestic disputes between a grown son and his wheelchair-bound father. It was never that bad, mostly just yelling, and the neighbors would call the police to check on them. No charges were ever pressed, so they'd usually just check in and be on their way. They got another one of those calls one day, thinking it'd be the same as usual. This time, the son is waiting outside for them. The partner is still questioning the son, and thinking the old man wasn't going to be a threat, she goes inside to deal with him on her own. She announced herself and approached him to talk. He doesn't say anything, but suddenly grabs for her gun. She pinned the gun and his hands to her side and tried punching him, pepper spraying, anything she could think of to get him to let go. Eventually, her partner heard her screaming and ran in to disarm him, and he was taken away. He later admitted he was gonna shoot her and then his son, and she was pretty shaken up after that. Next story. UK cop went to a run-of-the-mill slow-time domestic appointment, single crude. Arrive at the address and both parties are present, and it's a small one-bed flat. Try to speak to both separately, but neither speaks much English, and the male wouldn't leave the female, who's the victim, alone. My attendance was due to a call the previous night from a friend of the female due to her not speaking much English. Neither party spoke much English, but enough for basic questions. I asked simple questions and got told nothing was wrong. Begun questioning on information that I already had from the call, and the female has denied everything, but things didn't feel right. I begin to arrange for one of my colleagues, who spoke the same language, to call the female and speak to her over the phone to ask questions that the male couldn't hear. As I was doing so, she goes to the bathroom and comes back out a short time later. She has stood back by her partner, but slightly behind him, and when he's speaking to me, she pulls up the sleeve of her t-shirt and has written "Help me" on the top of her arm just above where her sleeve stopped. I've quickly gotten another unit on scene with me, and my colleague spoke to her on the phone after we managed to separate them, and she's disclosed an assault the night before where he's grabbed her by the throat and thrown her into a windowsill. He gets locked up, and I've arranged for her to come and speak to my colleague back at the station, where she discloses this wasn't the first occasion, but this is the first time she had spoken to the police, where he had previously beat her with a golf club for being late. Would hate to think what would or could have happened if I left her after she said she hadn't called the police. Next story. Not a police officer, but have a story. Once my dad was dating this woman who had a teenage son. The kid did not like my dad at all. One day, dad and his girlfriend got into a fight, and my dad slept in the garage. He woke up to her son and two of his friends holding baseball bats around him. The kid beat up my dad and ran off. My dad called the police to report the incident, but when the cops realized who my dad was, they arrested my dad on the spot for not paying child support to my mom. TLDR, my dad called the cops on his girlfriend's son, ended up getting arrested. Honestly, guys, what even is the justice system in a situation like this? Like, okay, you should be held responsible for not paying child support, but the guy just got bludgeoned with baseball bats, and that's all you're talking about? Next story. Former police officer, dispatched to a possible disturbance as soon as I got to work to relieve the day guys. Call came in that the neighbors are having a heated discussion and there might be a gun, but they didn't see one. I got a car as quick as I could and headed that way. Dispatch advised the suspect had left and was driving east, towards me. I found a vehicle matching the description and tried to do a traffic stop, but he wouldn't stop. It wasn't high speed or anything, he just didn't want to stop, using turn signals and everything. He finally pulled over, due to the possibility of a gun, and having no context as to why the caller thought there was a gun, I was cautious. I drew my pistol and had it in low ready, gave orders for him to step out of the vehicle, like in any felony stop. He ignored them. Backup arrived, so we decided to approach with caution and lethal cover. I got up to about 15 feet of his door, and he kicked it open, stuck the gun to his head, and self-unalived. Turns out, he was involved in some kind of old love triangle. The caller was not the neighbor, but his old squeeze, and the suspect had just left his wife, showed up to the victim's house, pointed a gun at her husband, and said he was there to kill him, and the wife called us under the guise of just a witness, despite them having multiple conversations. The suspect wanted her to leave her husband, and the suspect left his wife, assuming that was going to happen, but it didn't. Then I got behind him and turned on my lights. I'm glad he didn't make me kill him, but I wish it could have went a different way. And after a small stint in a psychiatric hospital and maybe a month or two of jail time, he would be alive. This may not seem too serious quickly, but about 6 months before that, I did a routine traffic stop, and as I walked up to the driver door to get his license, the bullet he unalived himself with barely missed me. He had a felony warrant from another state and was going to spend a very long time in prison. So, needless to say, traffic stops are never, and never should be considered routine. Next story. Not a police officer, but something I witnessed and may or may not have had something to do with it. Me and my friends were just chilling at my house playing Call of Duty and Halo. This was 2010. I have very noisy neighbors. Well, we thought we could play a prank on them by calling the cops on them and hope that might shut them up. Well, when we did, we said that we think they've been using and selling drugs. When the cops arrived like 30 minutes later, they busted down the door. We heard gunfire. This soon turned into a gunfight. My neighbor was apparently running his own drug cartel. They had to call backup and everything. I wonder what would have happened if me and my friends had not called the cops. They would have been found out and shut down eventually. So, I guess trust your instincts. Your hunch was correct. Next story. Not a cop, but I guarantee the ones involved remember this one. They were originally there to arrest a guy selling drugs on campus. They passed me in the stairwell on their way up while I was going to borrow some notes from a classmate. A few minutes go by and I'm back in the stairwell and get passed by the same cops on their way down and moving quick. Turns out they handcuffed the guy, sat him down, did God only knows what, while homeboy Superman out the window head first from the 11th floor. So that was an interesting day. He lived and he's somehow not a vegetable. Next story. Not an officer, but witness to an accident which turned into a drug and gun bust. Back when I was 18, I got into a bit of a blackjack habit at the local casino. Canada, so only need to be 18. I walked out of there one night around 2 a.m. and was having a smoke outside my truck when I see this semi-old man walk across the street to the parking lot. He wasn't on the crosswalk, but like 20 meters or so from an intersection. A vehicle came straight through the intersection, not speeding, driving perfectly normal, and this guy just froze like a deer in headlights. I imagine he was thinking that the car would swerve and avoid him. It was late at night, so no one else was on the road. But with all the snow on the ground, you simply can't brake and steer the vehicle. It just locks up and slides while turning sideways. The car hit the man, but relatively minor impact for a car hitting you. The side of the car hit the guy, and the snow kind of helped soften the impact to the ground. I immediately called 911. The driver got out and started helping the man. After I run over, he says he needed to go call someone and goes to his car. No biggie. The man is shaken, but no major injuries, and I thought the driver was just really shook up from hitting someone. Police and ambulance get there a couple minutes later, tend to the man, and the driver and I both give statements to different officers. I painted the guy in a good light, said he wasn't speeding, and tried to brake, but the snow and ice made him slide. I'm waiting to be told that I'm good to go when an officer finds a effing gun in the snow-covered planter. The idiot driver took it out of his car, went and dropped it in a planter on the sidewalk, and walked back over to his car on the road. Smart idea, but there's only one set of tracks that go from his car to his planter and then back, and an obvious hole in a fresh snow that's been piling up. He's arrested and they search the car. So yeah, he gets put in cuffs and into the cruiser. They searched the car, and I found out later they also convicted him for drug possession. Little did the cops know, I also had a quarter ounce of weed in my truck. Next story. Not a cop, but as a McD's worker, we called 911 on a group of teens who came in drunk and unruly. We called because one of them was a little more drunk and tipsy and sat down, put his head down, and passed out. His friends thought it was hilarious. Cops showed up with a smirk at first, figuring it was just dumb teens. When they poured a little cold water on Mr. Passed Out and he did not flinch, they stopped smiling. When they looked at his medic alert bracelet, they got real serious. Paramedics came and worked in the kid. He survived, but nearly died. He was diabetic and suffering alcohol poisoning. His blood sugar was way off. Cops said he would have died if we did not call them. Seeing the cops go from smirks to serious like that was scary. Next story. When I graduated high school, I got hired by my PD as a community service officer, CSO. We handled minor calls, transported prisoners, and served arrest warrants. One day, I was dispatched to go investigate a Hulk vehicle. A Hulk vehicle, for those who don't know, is a vehicle that's been abandoned on someone's property, and the property owner, who doesn't have the title, wants it gone. Law enforcement can come out and issue what's known as a Hulk vehicle permit, which allows the property owner to have the vehicle towed. So I get on the scene of this large wooded property, I'm guessing a couple hundred acres. The property owner is a management company and they want to build houses on the property, and they discovered several Hulk vehicles during their site visit. So I go about walking through the woods and investigating the vehicles as I came to them. They had been abandoned for at least 20 years, so it wasn't much of an issue. I finally reached the last vehicle, which was pretty far into the woods, and as I'm checking it, I realized there's an active meth lab operation next to me. I couldn't see anyone around, and I backed out the same way I came in, fearing booby traps. Got back to my car and called for immediate backup. Officers surrounded the scene, and SWAT got called out to clear the woods. They found 4 suspects hiding. All were armed, and they discovered a pipe bomb booby trap less than 50 feet from the car I was inspecting. Had I gone out a different way or approached the lab, I would have been killed. Fortunately, I listened to my gut and didn't touch anything and went out the same way I came in. Next story. Not a cop. I'm a nurse, but I was a vet tech at this time. I went to our main clinic for a meeting, which was next to a liquor store. Watched a guy get out of his car, staggering all over the place. We just thought he was just another drunk getting more juice. Then he collapsed on the ground. My coworkers ran over to him and immediately started CPR. Turned out that he had been sober for a year, but had felt bad all day. He decided he had enough of feeling bad and was going to get a drink. Turned out he felt bad because he had had a heart attack and was in heart failure. He didn't make it. Next story. Not me, but my dad. Also wasn't a police officer at the time, but a constable. He was going to a guy's house to serve him a summons, as is usual and routine. He got there and went up to the house, and the guy answered. As he's talking to him and serving him the summons, the guy pulled out a gun. My dad pulled out his and told him to drop the gun. Instead, the guy then turned the gun on himself and pulled the trigger. My dad was a cop before this, though, so it wasn't the first time seeing something like this. Next story. Former 911 operator, but not a cop. I had a call on 911 from this guy who was very meandering, and then it got really real. Hi, so I'm calling because there's this car. I think it's a Taurus. Ford Taurus, I guess. Anyway, it's got one headlight on. I guess the other one's burnt out, and it's just it's just running with that one headlight on. And it's in this parking lot for a community center, but I think it's closed. So I guess it's like, what's this car doing in this parking lot, right? Just one car in the parking lot, and it's on, and like one headlight. Oh yeah, and there's what? Turned out they were overdosing pretty hard. Next story. Barking dog into a shooting call. Drug deal gone bad. Soliciting call into a self-unaliving by police. Attempted by charging us with a knife. Disabled vehicle into a fatal crash. Trying to go to the bathroom and a burglary in progress call goes out in my area. Noise complaint about a neighbor call. Neighbor unalived himself with a gun. Drunk belligerent Uber passenger. He had a warrant for multiple murders. My fave, burglary in progress at night. Bad guy on scene. Get there to clear the house. Find the bad guy who nearly scared me crapless. Almost dumped a MP5 mag into him. Turned out to be cardboard cutout with homeowners' drunk friends who thought it would be a good prank. Bond, James Bond, with the gun pointing pose. I laughed after I could feel my heartbeat again. I forgot a lot off the top of my head. Next story. Not a cop, but I witnessed the event. I was at a McDonald's with a friend and we were sitting down eating when a lady with a cinder block came in. She sat behind a family at a booth with the cinder block on the table. An employee came over and asked her to remove the cinder block from the table, and she refused. The employee must have called the police because they showed up like 2 minutes after. She was standing next to the table and was calm, but refused to get the block off the table. The family sitting behind them got up and went to leave because the situation was a little much. When their maybe 4-year-old kid jumped out of the booth first, the lady quickly grabbed the cinder block and swung it over her head and tried to smash it on the kid. Somehow she missed it and it crumbled on the ground, and the dad and the cop flew in and pinned her to the floor. She got arrested, of course, but everyone was clearly upset. If that lady hadn't missed, it would have been really bad. The family was upset, and everyone in the restaurant were asking them if they were okay. Moral of the story, don't go to McDonald's. Yeah, famous last words, having a sit-down meal at McDonald's. Just kidding, of course, but glad to know that the child was okay and that the rogue cinder block missed. That could have been really bad. Next story. Was on my couch officer phase and responded to a call where one of our repeat customers was involved. The individual in question usually called us to resolve nonsensical issues with his neighbors. It was usually entertaining to go to his calls just because of the sheer hilarity and stupidity of it all. Well, one time during a boring shift where pretty much nothing happened, my coach officer and I, along with pretty much the entire sector, responded. Pretty much the entire shift in our division congregated there since we all know it was going to be a fun one. Well, my CO starts talking to him. Hey boss, what's up? And this individual, who we'll call Vlad, not his name, starts explaining the situation. My neighbor's at it again. He keeps looking at me through his window, all scared, like I didn't do anything to him yet. But I'll claim that ass eventually. And the conversation keeps going. Eventually, my coach officer at the time asks him about his other neighbor. So, boss man, how's Bob? Fake name again. Treating you. Oh, you don't need to worry about him anymore. He ain't gonna bother anyone anymore. You know what I mean? Oh yeah? Why's that? And so we're expecting some hilarious reply. You can see us grinning from ear to ear, waiting for comedic gold. Then Vlad replies, "'Cause I killed him. I done slit his throat. He tried to take my veggies." As you can imagine, we went from grinning to bursting out of laughter. My CO didn't laugh. At that point, we all took the hint. My coach officer was a 10-year vet and a wartime cop who knew his crap. If he thought something was up, so did we. Vlad then showed us the body of Bob, of which had been decomposing for a few days. Arrested immediately and charged. He didn't even go to court. He got off and was put into a mental health facility for the criminally insane. Kind of like a sanatorium or asylum. Guy turned out to be schizophrenic. Moral of the story, if a schizophrenic dude tells you he murdered somebody, chances are he did. P.S. For all of you Americans, a coach officer is an FTO. We're just fancy with our words up north. Next story. Not a cop, but when I was a kid, I needed to use the bathroom at Walmart, located in the back behind the tech area. I was using a stall when a guy entered the stall next to me. Being a bored kid, I noticed he had bright, distinct red shoes. Some time passes and I start to hear paper being torn, but thick paper, like a cardboard box. This dude drops a whole pair of headphones onto the ground, curses and picks them up. He then tries flushing all the evidence of the box down the toilet, and shockingly, most of it went down, industrial grade. He then left the bathroom trying to act normal. I wait a few seconds and then wash up and peek outside the door. No luck. I walk out and look around. Still nothing. I then remember the shoes. Bingo. I see him walking towards the middle of the store. I walked up to a customer service lady, middle-aged Indian woman, and tell her this dude was shoplifting a pair of headphones. She gets the whole story and calls security. They then have undercover guys watch him, as they can't do anything until he exits the store. I walk off to go find my family. This guy rounds an aisle and grabs me by my shirt and pushes me against the shelf. Hey, what did you say to that lady over there? Redditors, I should have won an Oscar. Oh, me and her go to school together, etc. He bought it. He lets me go and walks off. A few minutes later, he gets dragged inside by security and taken to the back office. Needless to say, I never went back to that store again. Next story. Not a cop, nor did I see this, but I heard about it. So apparently this random guy just walks up to my neighbor's house in Alabama and knocks on the door. As soon as someone answers the door, the guy shoots him dead. Then, the dead guy's wife fights off the gunman until the police arrive. Apparently, this dude knew the wife from therapy. She was a therapist and was trying to kill her, but instead shot the husband because he answered the door first. It was some pretty scary stuff. My dad ended up having to sew the wife up at the hospital. Next story. In Canada, check well-being call from neighbor of two early 20s longshoremen. She'd heard them yelling and screaming on and off throughout the night, and what sounded like glass breaking, then silence. I get there, guy opens the door, apologizes, said he and the roommate were playing Call of Duty in their separate rooms and were just really into the games. He hadn't heard the breaking glass, and his buddy in the other room had been AFK for a while. He assumed he was getting high or whatever. Go to the other guy's room, knock, and didn't hear anything. Announce that it's the police doing a wellness check. Nothing. Open the door, and the guy is dead, on the ground, a meatball sub in hand. Some of his stomach fluid has come out of his nose and ran up over his eyes, and it's all burned from the stomach acid. I'd had a few noise complaints from neighbors about these two in the past, so was expecting more bylaw. Definitely not a sudden death. Next story. Hospital security here. Right as I clock in, there's a call to escort a patient to the behavioral unit. Fairly run-of-the-mill stuff, but when I get to the floor, the patient is just wandering around with the sitter following. Normally, Baker Act patients are confined to their room until they go to the behavioral unit. When I get there, I ask her to stay in her room until the nurse can grab a wheelchair so we can go. She started yelling about how she had to go get her kids. The nurses arrive with a wheelchair and she just absolutely refuses to go near it. By this time, she's been yelling for a good 10 minutes now, so the nurses call for help, and in our case, that includes the local PD. So, last shift supervisor, my supervisor, and our PD officer show up, and the crap really hits the fan. We tell her that she can get in the wheelchair nicely, or we can put her in the wheelchair. After we put her in the wheelchair, she also got some Haldol that doesn't do a damn thing. She's still clawing at the furniture, trying to get out of the wheelchair. We put her back into the bed because she's having a panic attack and backed off a little. She starts screaming that we never gave her time to calm down and just immediately stuck her with a needle. Believe me, I would kill for a dart gun with some Geodon solve 80% of my problems. As the ED says, this is my friend G, and you'll sleep till dawn. So we wheel her down the hallway, holding her down on the bed. When we get her to the intake room, she's super rude to the behavioral nurses, and when she gets shown her room and is told that she'll have a roommate, she tells us all to F off and she'll sleep in the hallway. 3 more escorts that night were problems too. Next story. I worked in a rural area. There is a local woman who would always call. She used to be a nurse, but ended up going sort of crazy, using meth and just becoming a deplorable piece of trash. She would frequently call and report some BS burglary or life problem that she usually brought upon herself by her drug use and her friends' choices. One night, a friend of hers called and reported that he was at her shack and she was lying on the ground. rolling around and acting weird. I figured she got high and was acting weird. Myself and another deputy arrived and found the victim lying on the ground, mumbling and saying she was hurt, while the guy who called was calmly standing there smoking a cigarette and saying he didn't know what happened. He showed up and found her on the ground and called. We didn't think anything occurred other than her getting high and having some type of episode. My partner checked her out just to cover our bases, and we discovered she had been shot 7 times with a .22. Turns out she got into it with her parolee neighbor, and he took a .22 and unloaded on her. She lived, and he got 70 years. Next story. TLDR. Ride along went south and almost ended in a shooting. Not a LEO, but trying to become one. I was doing a ride along when we stopped a vehicle for going 67 and a 45. It was around 1 a.m. I pop my door and watch as my officer walks up to the driver window. They talk very briefly, and the officer walks back to me. So he's suspended, knows he's suspended, and the car is a rental that isn't in his name. So I'm going to give him a ticket for the speed, a ticket for the suspension, and impound the vehicle. Call 4014, another unit officer I know, and ask her to come out because he's going to be pissed. Okay, sick. So I call 414. She shows up and asks what's going on and about the guy's history, etc. She then posts up on the rental's right-hand taillight. I sit on the push bar, and the driver gets out of the car and walks to the trunk. He needed to grab his stuff. He was super apologetic and nice. Since it was a cold night, we were going to let him sit in our car until his ride showed up. So to set the scene, my officer on the left taillight, me on the push bar, driver at the trunk, and the female officer on the right taillight. Driver pops the trunk and just kind of stares into it. He then picks up a jacket, and the female officer screams, "Gun! Gun! Gun!" and draws on him. My officer does as well. So I'm frozen in fear as I'm in some major crossfire. I got back into cover as they ordered him to back up. My officer reaches in and secures the gun. He walks over to me and tries to clear it. It wouldn't clear. Turns out it was an airsoft gun. But for a brief second, I thought I was going to catch a few extra holes, LOL.